Hello, interns and associates, and welcome back to another episode of the Cubicle Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Armstrong, while my other co host is unable to be here today. He called out sick, actually. But today, we're going to be welcoming Doug Young. And within the podcast, every once in a while, we will sit down with a guest and talk about all things work related, snatching them the ideal promotion and work drama, all is said in the cubicle. So, welcome, Doug Young, to the Cubicle Podcast. It is so amazing to have you on board here today at the Cubicle Podcast. I'm so honored and so happy to have
Thanks, Charlie.
you. Yes, of
Yeah,
course. Now, to share a little
my
bit more
pleasure.
about Doug, because there is a lot to share about him. He is a Fashion Institute graduate as he graduated in 1987 and began working in New York's fashion photography world. And he's based out on Long Island, where I'm originally from too. And he has been involved in so many different photography projects, including traveling to Eastbound Long Island, to food, to travel and beyond. He's done it, and he is such an inspiration, I know, to all the aspiring photographers who want to be here. So thank you so much, Doug, for being a part of this. It is truly a pleasure.
Oh, sure, anytime. It's cool to talk to people that went to FIT, my alma mater.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's kind of crazy. You graduated a hot minute ago. How does it
A
feel now
hot
to like
minute
talk about it
ago, for sure.
How
Yeah,
does it feel to
when
kind
you
of like
say
talk about that again?
1987, I'm like, wow, that sounds really long, a long time ago. But it goes fast, It was a different time, that's for sure, back then. There was no cell phones and no social media and things like this. So we pretty much just went out to nightclubs all the time, and that was our studying. You could tell the first year students from the second year students at FIT because the first year students were all trying to outdo each other, like blue hair and all kinds of crazy outfits and stuff. And by the second year, it was, half the students that started, and it was the ones that were serious and they were growing their roots out, as I always said, as they trying to find themselves. And so, yeah, it was interesting 2 year school, 2 year program for me, but yeah, wouldn't change a thing.
I love that. No, that's amazing to hear. And there definitely is a difference because the first year students, they're getting used to what they just signed up for. And the second year, they grow out their hair and they're like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
here. It's time to lock in. Let's get serious and let's chill out a little bit.
yeah,
Not
that's
be too
right. Yeah,
performative, right?
it's time to get serious. Yeah.
It's
Well,
serious.
in the photography program in particular, I remember it started out with there had to be at least 25 students in my class. It was very difficult to get into, and I took a Saturday Live program, they called it, when I was in high school in Bayport, and you went on every Saturday and you took, photography classes at FIT. They kind of, brought students in. So that was really a big help for me to, I think, to even get into the school because I showed how and how much initiative I had early, and they really like the students that get into FIT are driven. I find they want to do something with their lives, you know,
Mhm.
and if they really like something and passionate about something, they that was the school to kind of hone your craft in. Yeah, but the first year, like I said, was 25 students, but they really kind of weaned you out of who was really serious, mostly by stripping away all your creativity. I mean, you might have been the number one photographer in high school, but when you were there, you were nobody, and you had to learn everything all over again. They basically, said you don't know anything. So,
No,
and you had to
seriously.
start from the beginning. And by the second semester, even in the first year, half the class was gone because it wasn't for them. They didn't want to, you know, they it just wasn't for them. So by the time the second year rolled around, that's when they really were like, okay, we've taught you all the skills and stripped away everything that you thought you knew. And now the second year is, what do you have to say? Like, what kind of photographer are you? So it was interesting that they kind of take you down and build you up, you know? And by then it was only 15 people in my class. So
It gets competitive the more as time
yeah,
goes on. You like narrow it down, then people finally figure out what their passion is and how serious they are with being a part of that program. So it's and I could see that happening later on, especially with like a design. Well, it's not it's a design in a way, but there's also such a technicality with photography.
Very much. In fact, that's the name of the degree is applied science. And being a state university, they have to live up to that name. I mean, you have to really technically be know what you're doing. And I mean, to this day, I still don't know how I know things technically, and it just kind of when you're in the moment of taking a picture, it just kind of numbers come to you and things, and it moves very quickly. But the knowledge is there. I think it just was really honed in at FIT for sure. Because if you're getting a degree in it from a state university, you do kind of have to know what you're talking about.
You do.
Photography isn't all just taking pictures. There's quite a lot of math involved and quite a lot of back in the day with film, there was even more challenges with film. So shooting film. There was something in particular that's not probably not that interesting to most people, but it was called the bellows factor, which was light falling off before it hits the lens. You had to technically adjust exposures based on that, theory. So
Mm.
yeah, it can get dizzying. It's like I just want to take pictures. I definitely wasn't a math major.
And you know
So
what? If
yeah,
math isn't your thing, go to photography.
yeah, right,
And
yeah.
especially within
Well,
your perspective, I want to ask. So we were talking a bit about the program. What originally made you want to go into photography and go to FIT?
Well, the truth is, I took it in high school, and I think ninth grade of Bayport High School used to offer, art classes and stuff, and they offered photography. It was with Miss Florence Spina was the instructor. She was a great teacher, and she just kind of, they had cameras. They would hand cameras to the students. He would, sign it out, or they were old Nikon Fs and maybe a couple of other Nikon Ks, just old film cameras, and they had a dark room. So you would go in the darkroom and develop your film and then print it. And I remember she wanted us to do an assign, she would give us creative assignments. And one of the assignments was to photograph, someone. And I remember seeing my friend Linda Ringhouse, who I'm still friends with. She owns the People's Pub around the corner there. She was very tall and very beautiful girl, but I found that nobody really kind of noticed but me that I was like, does anybody see this, runway model walking down the hallway? So I asked her if I could take pictures, for this assignment. And she said yes. And I ended up winning out of all the high schools on Long Island. I won like, first place or something with that picture. And I remember, I tell this story a lot. People have asked me a lot, but it was definitely a light bulb moment. I was developing the picture in the darkroom, and the minute that picture came up in the tray, I was like, "This is what you're going to do." I knew it. It was like a flash.
Mhm. You
So
saw your
yeah,
life flash before your eyes, like this is
I
your
did.
career
Yeah,
and this is what
yeah,
you love. Like it's just like the passion just sparked right then and right there. That
that's
was like
right. Yeah,
this
it was
fire.
definitely a light bulb moment. It really was. And yeah, and then I just, looked into that Saturday program at FIT and went to that, and then I got into FIT and moved to the city and never looked back. But I ended up coming back here. So, but lived in the city for quite a while.
Did you ever encourage them being like, oh, you have to like get into modeling? You're my muse for like photography. Like what was
Oh,
like
sure.
that afterwards?
She still was my muse and still is to this day. We still take pictures. But she didn't pursue modeling, but we always took pictures all the time. So beyond that, we always did. Even when I was at FIT, we did some fun different shoots. So yeah, she was always a great muse and still is.
During FIT and even during like high school and all throughout that time, I'd love to get into talking more about your projects. What projects have you been involved with?
I mean, I guess what one of the things that when I left FIT and started, I was a photography assistant for a lot of fashion photographers. One of them was Fabrizio Ferri, and I was trying to kind of break into fashion photography and used to have portfolios, big portfolios, and you'd go to magazines. And I used to work for some modeling agencies testing models, they would call it. So girls that were just starting out, they would, pay me like $75 or something to take pictures of them to develop their portfolio. And so I did that for quite a while, but every time I went to show like fashion photography, I found that editors of magazines were more attracted to my lifestyle pictures than they were when I was trying to be like a fashion photographer. I had pictures of, like I said, just of my friends, laying, at the beach or something. And the editors, one editor in particular, who was at Vogue, I believe. She was like, "This is the best picture in your portfolio. It's real. You have a real eye for lifestyle photography, which is, a niche of its own." So that kind of, inspired me to kind of even move back out to Long Island because I was like, all my inspiration was really out here. I found that the city and studio photography and everything just, it didn't get me like when I would go to the beach or find these beautiful locations on Long Island and the seasons and all the things that, I was always bringing models to out here to shoot. So I'm like, well, I might as well just come back out here. And then that kind of rolled into starting to work for some magazines in the Hamptons. Pretty much the Hamptons were the only place that I could really work compared to New York City. And there was already, the big magazine was Hamptons Magazine. And there was a few others, grassroots magazine that started. One of them was called Edible East End. I think I should show you that. And
I
this was
see
like a
it.
great food and agricultural magazine. And this title is all over the United States. But Edible East End was one of the first ones that I started working for. And then they asked me to be the photo editor at Edible Long Island, which started about 2 years after that. There's something on the Great South Bay there.
Wow, that's
Um,
cool.
and that was a lot of fun. And that's where the travel kind of thing started too, because Edible used to do travel issues. Once Long Island started, and so we would come. I started writing travel stories. They asked me if I could write too, and I said sure. So this was Uruguay, this was North Carolina, where I have some family, and
You said Uruguay?
yeah, Uruguay. No, no, and I have family in North Carolina, but that wasn't Uruguay. Was one travel. So this is in where was this? Olbash, Mexico.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, it's just that was the travel thing with started with Edible because they had a travel issue. So that really was a way for me to showcase everything that I love about photography, which was food, lifestyle, people, farmers, landscapes, anything to tell the story. So that was, and then, what was great about Edible or being involved in it, like the former editor of Edible East End now is editor of this magazine, Edible Port City. So because they're all over the United States, it's down in Wilmington, North Carolina. So we just recently reconnected. So I'm shooting for them now when I go and visit my family, so that's kind of interesting how things kind of with photography you should always, never end on a bad note or just, always keep your connections happy. And because things always seem to kind of come back in full circle, people stay connected. And that was, photography does that. It kind of like once you're a photographer and you've worked with people like to work with photographers they're used to, working with.
Mhm.
So, and so much that, they'll fly you there to get you there if you don't live there. So,
So how was travel photography for you? Like I love to hear like more about like your experiences and like what photos you were able to take.
similar to kind of like a blog and I was always following a lot of travel stories in food magazines. So to me, the because Edible was a food magazine, the way that they told travel stories was different than, say, another magazine that would be mention all kinds of places to go. So nor most of the focus was, say, like a restaurant or a chef that's in a particular place. So an example would be Lucia Sordia, who was in Uruguay, opened a restaurant in where was it? Hampton Bays for a season. This is her food here. And it was the best restaurant, Charlie, I ever went to. To this day, it's still like a very memorable experience eating there. They really had a gorgeous outdoor deck and plants everywhere, and you just didn't feel immediately you were like, where are we? Like this doesn't feel like Hampton Bays. The food, everything was so different. And then when, you know, I found out that she was from Uruguay, Montevideo, I was like, oh, I'd love to see that part of the country. And she's like, you should come. And so, and then I talked to the editor and a friend of mine wanted to see it too. So we both went to Montevideo and I arranged to meet with her there and wrote a story about her restaurant and where she sources. And then outskirts of areas of Uruguay, I wrote about as well, different restaurants in like Jose Ignacio. And so, yeah, I think the food element or the restaurant element as the background for the travel stories is what I really like to do. And that's kind of where things have led, usually food focused. lately, not so much. The recent ones I've done pretty much more of a general thing, but I do try to keep it interesting and off the beaten path, places that people don't know about. And there, it's so photography driven, the shooting it and writing about it is what, I think really works for me because I'm illustrating things that I'm seeing and putting it into a guide for people, and they get to see it the way that I see it. Does that make sense?
How was it being able to write while also being able to capture the experience and capture like a story through the photography? Was it challenging? Did you find it like interesting to be able to kind of put the story into words?
I always loved writing, even in high school. I enjoyed writing, and I used to be in a band and used to write songs and stuff. And so I think I've always, enjoyed writing. And the first time that was the first time that I was asked to do it was by a magazine called Hampton's Cottage and Garden, and there was a article called a column called Made in the Hamptons, and I would go and photograph these artisans in the Hamptons or sometimes in New York, in the city, and sometimes the writer would show up, and sometimes the writer didn't show up. So, and I was always like, they're talking to me anyway. Why don't I just write it? So the editor was like, yeah, I want, if you want, I've seen some of your travel writing. You saw some of the things that I had written in Edible, and he was like, oh, what? So why don't you write the column? I mean, I'm like, I'm already there. They're already talking to me. What I find is people, when you're photographing them, especially people that are doing a craft, say like a ceramic artist or a glass blower, when they're doing that, they're talking to you, the photographer. They're showing you and explaining to you. So you're getting all this information that the writer who isn't there doesn't get from like an interview. You know what I mean? Like this, you really get great quotes from people who want to tell their story, and when they're in the middle of what they're doing, they're so open, they really are, Charlie. Like they're just talking about, so I remember all that, and then I go back and ask them particular questions about the process. So I think writing the way that I write, a lot of it is basically getting great quotes from people, for people to open up to you. And that pretty much writes the story right there. I mean, yes, you have to kind of do all of the who, what, where, when, and why. I think that's the 5W rule. You got to keep that in mind. And then you find that you kind of develop a style. And, now with AI, it's helpful that it can kind of organize your thoughts, but you always have to stay true to your voice. In fact, someone pointed that out recently to me, like, oh, I kind of felt like it didn't sound like you. And I was like, well, I mean, I did, get some help from AI in organizing my thoughts, but so you have to be kind of careful with that too. I mean, stick to your voice and don't let anybody change your voice.
I
Yeah.
think because AI, we talk about it like every podcast episode,
Yeah.
and AI, just by the fact that we talk about it every episode, I think shows how impactful it is in so many different professional careers that people are in. Do you have any concerns with the use of AI in photography, even maybe your word, for example?
What I like about it is I like this synopsis part of like transcribing an interview, which could be very, very tedious and take a very long time. To pull quotes out was so having like a recorded, like what we're doing, having a recorded session, and then having AI being able to help kind of do a synopsis of the conversation, right? Summarize the conversation. Not what I meant. And I think I need AI. So,
Don't we all a little bit?
um, I use it so much I can't talk anymore. No, sorry.
You're totally
Anyway,
fine.
the summary part of kind of organizing your thoughts, that part I love, and it has saved me a tremendous amount of time to be able to focus on how I want to tell the story. So I think if you use it the way it's supposed to be used, it's great. But if you're not putting any of the work into it, yeah, it's just going to sound like a press release made by a robot. It can organize you like an assistant. If you treat it like an assistant, then it's great.
I agree. I agree. I
Yeah,
think it can be a friend. It can be a friend.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
sustainability wise, not the best. That's the only problem.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
we're running out of water. So that's
Yeah.
another issue.
That's true. That's a very scary thought. And I don't think people really think about that until you realize like how like what is charging all of this information? How much electricity is this needing? And
Yes.
that's a very scary thought.
We're going to run out. World Health Organization just announced that if we, for the next like 3 to 5 years, continuously use AI the way that we are, we're going to run out of clean water to drink.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Society. It's terrifying. That's
Yeah,
why
that is
I'm like, I
scary.
see the pros of AI, but I really do think in general as a society, we really need to limit our use of AI. We have to, which is so unfortunate because it's used in so many different platforms that we use and
Yeah.
found in things that we don't even expect it to be found in, which is the
Yeah,
scary.
I think if they can figure out another way to power it, which maybe they can explore, sure, other, solar or things like that too. But
I
yeah, that's a big question.
So compared to today versus back then, because I know you were really starting out in the 80s and the 90s, getting into photography, how is it different from then when you started to now?
In having that kind of growing up shooting models and having kind of training an eye, I worked on a lot of catalog photography as an assistant. I learned so much about lighting on those kind of shoots, what flattering light is. And so I think the influence that I have had on that what I got out of fashion photography has influenced the way that I light food. I think people tell me that I'm a great lighter because with flash and with available light that I always see the light where the light is for the best shot. And that's a fashion thing. You take people where the light is great. You're always putting someone by a window or, you know, out with shadows, to make drama. All those things apply to my food photography, I find too. So I think I treat food like a fashion model. And composition. I love composition. So that is kind of that comes from still life, working with still life photographers where product photographers, that was always food photography back in the 80s was really horrible. It was real like it wasn't like what it is today. It was glue was milk and hairspray and Vaseline. The food was unedible. It was really boring and strange and just like it just was the weird like being I remember like this is weird like but then there was some sort of revolution with food photography. I think when chefs became kind of celebrity chefs and restaurants became, like destinations and think, decorating wise and that just with like fashion, the way that, well, yeah, sorry, back to food photography was really strange back in the 80s and not something I ever thought that I would do. It wasn't until I guess around the late 90s that things started changing. They were doing more like lifestyle kind of mixed in with food, like bringing even models in. There was a photographer named Roland Brummer, I remember, and they just did these great stories with people and holding food and it just became much more organic and food became more of a way of life documenting it that way and like almost kind of a European way and so that's what I love is telling more of a story behind the food.
And especially because, yeah, back then, obviously, I'm sure it's very different how it is today based on the food and assortment and
Yeah,
how things were being seen and how you can kind of
I
put
mean,
technology.
I did this cookbook, with a Florence Fabricant, it's a Ladies Village Improvement Society cookbook.
Wow,
um
it's
This
beautiful.
was this is a the LVIS is a they pretty much planted all the trees in East Hampton and they do a lot of good things for the community and this was their 125th anniversary book. They've always done cookbooks and so they asked me to come on board and shoot this which was with quite a few famous celebrity chefs as well as people that were just members and Florence Fabricant put all these menus together based on all these recipes. So it was a really interesting thing to shoot. It took 2 years, and I found that, that's where I picked up styling and picked up, shooting stuff on the fly and really like moving fast and getting these things shot. So
What do you think separates a restaurant from another regarding not only just maybe like the food, but then like the story, like capture that photo, capture that story, capture the art?
each each chef, I mean, if it's a restaurant that's chef forward, they have a vision for their food and how they present it. So a lot of times you're just kind of, you get in the kitchen with them, you develop rapport with them. And a lot of the chefs that I've worked with on this book and, in restaurants frequently call me back to work with them again because you develop this relationship when you're that close with them and documenting them in the kitchen and sourcing ingredients and plating. And chefs are very visual people too. I mean, there's some very intense plating and there's some people that do really organic and easygoing plating. I mean, it's all different. All these different chefs, each one has a unique tale to tell, I find. And that's what I find interesting. Each one is a different experience.
What are some of your favorite restaurants that you were able to go to on Long Island? And are there still some today that you're photographing right now or projects that you're already in the works with?
Well, what ended up happening was when I was working, like I said, at Edible, I had met another writer there who worked for Edible Manhattan and Edible Brooklyn. And then we occasionally he was a cocktail writer. Her name is Amy Zavato. And she would write a lot of features for like the New York Post about cocktails and the Hamptons. And so we knew each other from Edible. We met, a few times, but we were both kind of like ships passing in the night a little bit with like, I would be like, I would see that she wrote it and she would see that I photographed it and we would, get a kick out of that and be like, oh, I didn't know you were shooting that. Oh, I didn't know you were writing that. Anyway, when she started, she was asked to be the editor at a magazine called South Forker. I'm trying to see where I can find it. Oh, here it is. South Forker is the sister publication to North Forker magazine, which was a great magazine out in the North Fork that was kind of, I felt like it kind of took over after Edible ended. But this is South Forker and Amy Zavato. This is a story about a hotel that I photographed. She approached me with almost a photo editor kind of position, even though they couldn't call me that or hire me to do that. But I ended up doing a lot of the feature photography with her. So she's like, I can't do it without you. And so I helped her get the magazine off the ground. And I'm still working for them now, 3 years on. But around about a couple of issues in, she asked me, how would you like to write the recipe column? And because I remember you did something like that for Edible, and so she, approached me with doing that, and that ended up kind of becoming, I did one, and she was like, "It's great," and so now that's a weekly column that I write for both titles, and it's in print in both titles in every issue. It's been wonderful to hone in on the food photography weekly and shooting food. Like I have no choice. So, and sometimes it's difficult to find stories. A lot of times, so seasonal in the Hamptons, there's definitely a lull of trying to find stories. So I end up, talking more about ingredients or, there's a lot of soup stories in the winter and kind of, casting the net out and the stories out a little further into more about the people behind the food and not just the restaurant or the chef, but the farmer too, and the someone that's doing something unique like preserves or scones, or there's a lot of people that are independent bakers, like a story about them. And so it's endless, the amount of stories are out there. It's just sometimes a little harder to find them off season. So it can be
I'm
challenging.
I'm gonna switch for 1 second to even like taking pictures of models or beaches on Long Island. Like, where is your favorite place to shoot? Like on Long Island, if you had to choose, like, because I know
Oh, that's a
Long
tough
Island is
one. Yeah,
beautiful. It is
yeah,
beautiful. I can attest that as we do have a lot of natural beauty for sure.
yeah.
What's the spot?
I mean, I guess if I had to pick something from around where I live and grew up, I love like the Maritime Museum over in West Sayville. That's a really striking landscape that always changes through the season. And there's something very magical about that particular spot that it's been just kind of left untouched. And I like those places that are still kind of, blow you away where they've just been like this forever, you know what I mean? And they're infrequently being hard, they're being harder to find, is what I'm trying to say. Like you don't see that things get built up really quickly out here. So a lot of things vanish. So when you can find something that's still there from when I was a kid, that I love. I would say that's one of my favorite places. I've shot a lot of pictures there. Hamptons, is also wonderful. The beaches certainly are really beautiful. And I love the North Fork, ruralness of it that's still there, and always surprised by, what the quietness you can still get there when you're driving, and can just be really breathtaking. And it's all for you. I find like that's what's interesting. Like because I'm out all the time by myself shooting, the things that get shown to me, I never take it for granted.
Mm.
I always feel like it's a gift when, that's like here's a little show for you, and you can take a picture of it if you'd like. So,
Exactly. And
yeah,
there's
yeah,
so much to capture, especially because like I
yeah,
I agree. I think every spot that you mentioned was are they're all so beautiful. And
yeah.
like I love like that drive like going on the North Fork. I like the Hamptons. Like the beaches are stunning. And even like the streets and the town, like a lot of like the different towns that are there, like they all have like their own story. And then even like in Sayville or some other spots, like it's just gorgeous on Long Island.
Um, yeah, I think, just when I did this book called Hampton's Gardens, was a coffee table book by a pretty well-known French publisher named Asseline. And so this was that book, Hampton's Gardens. That came out in 2010. And that was that really got me into, I love taking pictures. A lot of landscape designers, one in particular named Jack DeLashmet, would hire me to shoot their garden projects every season. And I did work at a place called Martyrs in Bridgehampton, and they would hire me as well when they found out I was a photographer, hire me to shoot all the garden installations for them as well. July 15th was the date for everything being in bloom. But yeah, so that's one of the craziest things. Like here's a great example of,
Wow.
just beautiful. The garden photography is one of my favorite things to do. I I still work. I do it not as often as I'd like, but I have one client, two sisters, Demoro, and they do some very interesting landscape design with native plants. So I love learning about that kind of, those kind of plants and different things you can bring back in and introduce back into landscape design. And it doesn't always have to be all, chemical lawns. In fact, I love a wild field of, weeds can be just as beautiful as a manicured lawn.
I would love to ask lately, have there been any projects you've been working on recently, and how has the experience been for you? Like, have you been traveling on the islands, doing it more locally? Like, what's been happening right now?
Well, right now it's definitely a slower few months. And well, right now what starts are the magazines, the two titles that I work for, and the three titles, Hampton's Cottage and Garden, South Forker, and North Forker. All three of them are working on May issues, believe it or not. So magazines are always 3 months ahead. So with that being said, your work kind of always starts around this time of year. January and February is not can be very, challenging for freelancers. You got to love you got what you do to kind of deal with that, because it can be, to this day, it's still all a matter of, how the economy is and what people's budgets are, and things changing so much all the time with technology and phones. People feel like they can, just do stuff with their phones, and free advertising, and don't have to invest into magazines. But there are still, successful stories being told, and with it. And like you said, just right now I'm going into summer season 2026 in the Hamptons and North Fork world. And I'm also, I'm doing some kind of content creation. There's all these new terminology now for what you do. It's not just photography anymore. It's content creator. Yeah, so all that kind of, how, you just have to kind of adjust. That's the thing with photography, and you have to adjust to the changing times as well. I'm frequently asked if I do video. I'm always asked if I do video. It's not a skill that I wanted to pick up, but I'm finding more and more that I'm going to have to learn it. And I do the phone video like everybody else does, and that's fine. But yeah, people are asking me all the time if I do drone, this and that. So you have to cut with photography. You constantly have to. You're still challenged to keep up with technology and learn new skills.
You do. And with technological advancements, things you do have to kind of pivot and adapt. And
Yeah,
as my mom has always said, if you can't get out of it, get into it.
that's
And
right. That makes total sense. Yeah.
It really does regarding like what you do regarding anything. But I can imagine photography in any creative field, it can get very challenging where it's like, okay, this is changing. We're heading more into, yeah, like a content creating influencer world and how to capture in very short but digestible ways that could be appealing to the everyday observer on social media. How has that been now showcasing through social media?
Having a website I found was always, back in the 80s, you had a physical portfolio, like I talked about before. You dragged that around with you, and it was called tear sheets, where you would, if you had anything published in a magazine, you tore it out and you put it in a portfolio, so you could show people what you had that was printed and press in a publication. Um, Websites came in after that, and everybody had, everybody had to have one of those. I I had one briefly. I remember Mac had, like, when Mac first started, they had some templates. Um, and then when Instagram kind of started to take off, I started following people. My friend Linda actually really pushed me to get on it. I was kind of like, I don't want to do that, and but then I found that it does kind of become a curated wall. Like, you have, when you see all of your pictures, the more that you post, you start to see your style, and you can really kind of express yourself, how your what your point of view is through Instagram. I find, just by how you're selective of what you put out there and what you're putting on your wall. I don't particularly go for the social aspect of any of the social media things. I pretty much keep my Instagram is purely business. It's just my showcasing my photography and my work, and so I guess that has really, I've gotten so many clients just from that it doesn't really make sense for me to have a website. I guess I could, but it's just kind of the algorithm thing and all that has kind of changed what people see, and but I do find when people are hiring me, especially people that own hotels, or doing the hiring for they want great photography and they also want content. And they look at my site, they see that I do both of those things, and that's a selling point. You have to kind of keep it up with it, and keep learning. There's more. There's always new things to learn. There's a lot of great templates and tools out there, but I try to just try to keep up, Charlie.
You do. You were talking about tools and what is out there right now. What tools are you using for photography?
I've always been a Nikon guy. I've always had invested in Nikon equipment, and I find that Nikkor lenses are the sharpest of all lenses. And photography still is, in the terms of 35 millimeter photography, or now digital photography, it still is all about the lenses. The lenses are what makes things, really beautiful. So I have my two choice lenses that I still use now. Moving into digital, because everything was film when I first got out of school, and for years assisting, I would be loading film backs and for these shoots. Um, that When that moved to digital, that was a big learning curve, I think, for many photographers, but it was something I had to kind of, just do and figure out. Digital cameras, when they first came out, were really kind of awful. They didn't have any highlights, and I hated it. But now they're amazing. The next thing now is mirrorless cameras, which eliminates mirrors, obviously, and it is a different way to look through. The camera is a strange thing. You kind of feel like you're looking through a video screen. But I have to really jump on board with that too. That's the next thing. So you have to kind of adapt as cameras change. You have to change.
You do.
It can get very technical, and there's a lot to learn. But in the end, still basic photography rules always apply, and lenses are the same. So all of that, all of that has not changed much. Just the presentation of it all. Editing, I use a software called, right now and for the last 5 years, called Capture One, which is a great editing tool and processing tool. So I have my formulas that of processing that give things the look that I like. I name them. I have one called Australia. So, and that brings a lot of, so yeah, you have to kind of just find your groove with processing and filters and this and that, and don't want to, you have to still keep things natural. I don't like things to look too crazy fake or oversaturated or but I do like a nice colorful shot, and I love black and white still. I like turning things black and white to make things more interesting. And yeah, Capture One's a great tool. I don't know what I would do without that. So that's also for tethered shooting, which is when you hook up your camera to a computer so you can see the image right away on a monitor. That's great for clients when you're working with clients that want to see the image right away, especially with something like interiors, which are very take a long time. I mean, you move a chair an inch and it makes the picture better. And to do that, you really need to look at a monitor and shoot tethered to a computer so that you can fine tooth an image without having to look through it. You're doing it live. You know what I mean? It's like you're fine tuning a picture. So when everybody's on board and says that's the shot, you can press number 5 and make it a 5 star, and then you know that you got the picture. Like it kind of saves time as opposed to going through hundreds of pictures to find that one. Oh, I wish the chair was to the right, or I wish those flowers were not there, or things like that. So you're basically when you're tethering shooting, you're editing, you're live editing. Does that make sense?
It does
Yeah,
make
you're
sense. Yeah.
in real time. You're editing in real time. Yeah,
I see. That's
yeah,
really cool that has that like
yeah,
feature that you're able to do that because
yeah.
it does just by hearing that save a lot of time. And I think in
Yes,
that sense, and I think that's like almost like your version of AI in that sense, like the time efficiency like aspect of it, like that's like what helps. And then to get you even like onboarded and get you working
yeah.
on other things related to other projects and stuff like that. Like that
Right.
is useful if you're a busy and booked photographer.
I
That's
mean, there was definitely some people that I mean, I remember having one client that I was doing for, and they just couldn't get past it. They were like, they couldn't deal with the fact that the image was right away in front of them. I think because they realized that they couldn't they couldn't go back and say, oh, I didn't like that. You know what I mean? Like they're seeing it. You have no choice but to approve it or not. Like you see the image and you're like, okay, what needs to be fixed? And and if it's a person, an art director or the client, it kind of puts them in the position of they're signing off on the final picture. And I think sometimes people don't like that responsibility. Like they want to be able to do that later on
Mhm.
after they, see pictures. They'd rather look through 20 pictures and then pick them apart and find what they like rather than being like, oh, I have to make this decision right now. Yes, you have to make that decision right now.
And this is a
Yeah,
make it or break a decision too. This is a
yeah,
critical moment in time, and we need this
yeah.
answer like as soon as possible. I can imagine, and that's insane. Like that's amazing that like you're able to like have these like abilities to do that with photography. I have to say. And what is like a dream project that you hope to be a part of in the future? I'm
I
curious.
mean, right now I'm really focusing on travel writing and shooting, and I have a few things out with a publication called James Lane Post, which is another Hamptons publication, and another FIT graduate that I am friends with, who is one of the editors. Her name's Ty Baerbatek, Ty Wenzel, her name now, but she does this great newspaper that's out in the Hamptons, and it's huge. It's kind of like the New York Times size. It folds up and it's big. So it's a and this great font that she has for it. It's called James Lane Post, and it's a lot of fun. It's local stories, but it has a travel section. So she approached me about that when they were launching it, and so I had my first assignment that I did was for one of the Balearic Islands called Menorca, and I pitched that and they loved it, and did these great spread, and they have a great website too, that so an online presence so you can read it online, and so those I'm really excited about those, and hope to kind of have that develop even further. Being hired, like Travel and Leisure magazine would be an ideal assignment. So
Mm,
we'll see. I always figured that if I could write and shoot, that gives me, two things rather than having to when people have to hire someone, they don't have to hire a photographer and a writer. They can hire me because I do both. So to me, it was a kind of a logistic step.
A logistic step in the process that you need to go
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you have to kind of, I always laugh and use this expression, you got to wear a lot of hats. But it's true. You have to be able to do multiple things, I think, today. And you can't just be one thing, you know?
You need to have
And
multiple talents.
if you have the
You chase
talent,
your talents.
right? Yeah.
You do. No, you seriously do. That's just like a perfect example of it.
Yeah.
And what is like one thing that you've learned like very recently in photography that you could that have really like impacted like your skills and that may be an influence for maybe other photographers coming in? Like what have you learned recently that you're like, "Oh my God, like this is like in not maybe not even just content creation, for example, but like something else where you like learned where you're like, oh my God, like this is like what I'm doing now, and I need to, I like this is what I have to do, and like because you were saying you always have to kind of learn.
Yeah, I think you don't really want to stay stuck in you can be known for certainly a point of view, which I've said many times, um, which was told to me about my work by someone that I knew a while ago. She said, "You have a very distinct point of view," and I thought that was no one ever had ever said that to me before. But I think that's what you kind of have to hone in on, meaning that um, when you like with Instagram, you kind of start to see that, like I said, especially because you're seeing work being posted over a period of time. And like you could see 5 months of work on your grid, and you start to see what you like, the things that you want to post, things that you like, things how certain things look, composition. Um, so I think that's a great way to kind of hone in on what your vision is. But at the same time, with like food photography, I'm finding that shadows are things change all the time. Sometimes it's like there was a period, I hope it's ending, where things looked like very badly lit and kind of like old Jello commercials, like 1970s pictures. I just thought they were pretty awful, So the trends, and I wasn't about to hop on that trend wagon. Like, don't change who you are and how you see things because of trends. Try to stick to what your style is and how you see things, and but also be willing to try different things. If you're inspired by other photographers, I constantly look at other photographers' work, and so I would think that lately, right now, I'm finding I'm more attracted to shadows, harsher shadows, for food, and then I used to be more of like Martha Stewart kind of lighting, which I like too for certain things, more of a soft kind of window light look. But I was just shooting. Here's a good example. I was just shooting Irish soda bread. My friend Amy Cerno makes preserves, Miss Amy's preserves, and we did a shoot together. We had worked together for a long time, and we did her recipe for Irish soda bread, and I had a setup where I had the light kind of scrimmed. It was direct sun, but I had it scrimmed. It was very soft light and very nice, but there was no. I mean, it was fine, but there was no edge to it. So, and then what was funny is we were taking the picture on the set, which was lit with a scrim and whatnot. But then when we took it off and put it in the hot sun, we were both looking at it and I'm like, wow, that looks amazing. Let's take it there. So I think, the way that light changes, I think it'll show you if you're open to it, of how to photograph something. You have to be willing to be like, let's try it over there. You know what I mean? Let's try it over here. You can't be stuck in like, this is where we're taking the pictures. You know what I mean? Because the minute you do that, you're going to be like surprised that, oh, that would look how great that looks. I wish we had, you don't want to regret anything. So try a bunch of different things. Food also is tricky because it dies very quickly. doesn't look good for very long. So if you have to shoot very, really fast. That's where lighting comes in. A lot of electronic lighting I use too in restaurants because most restaurants are dark. So you have to develop a style of lighting. I have now in the last few years, I've gotten more into a particular type of lighting for cocktails, and I shoot a lot of cocktails and wine and spirits, and that needs a very interesting kind of light. It almost needs more of a grid style light, so it looks kind of evening-ish and feel, you have to create a mood, with what you're shooting.
Mhm. Does that excite you within photography? Like,
There's nothing like you want to capture the vibe of the place too, so and it can be challenging if you have to light it. So you have to kind of hone it in that it still feels like it's in a restaurant and still feels like it's part of the restaurant's vibe, and if you can capture that and develop that, and then the next time you go back there when they hire you again, you already know what works. So then you really can jump off and you're like, I know what lighting works for that place. I've done it before. And then you really can, focus in on what they want. And, so that's one of the good things is kind of the repetition of trying something that works and then kind of putting it in your arsenal. You have a few skill sets that are go-tos, like this is my go-to lighting for cocktails, my go-to lighting for, breads, or go-to for, any people and interiors. And so,
mhm.
yeah.
Have you shot interiors before? Or will you have
Oh
like
yes, I've
on
done,
everything?
yeah, I've done a lot of interiors. I do love shooting interiors, but they are very time consuming and can be a bit monotonous, and it's not the most exciting thing in the world. But if you do it in, I do it in a certain way. I've found, like, like here's an example of, like a lifestyle shot from an interior shoot. But that was my shirt and my hat hanging on the hook, and that ended up being the cover. So it's that kind of stuff that, you have to be open to shooting everything. And I do like interiors. There's a lot of competition in it. I do like hotel design, but that's the part that I really like about it is the design aspect of it. See, that kind of comes with my fashion background too a little bit. I love interior design, and when people do it really well, especially with hotels, they can just do amazing things with gardens and, places I've stayed. I'm blown away sometimes by the places I've seen. So, yeah, yeah. It's so to be able to document that, and but like, yeah, interiors are very technical, and that's usually when I have an assistant with me, if it's in the budget. I usually what they call a digital tech. So when you're shooting tethered with the client, then I have somebody that's on the monitor that's actually processing the images and live and straightening things. And there's also a tremendous amount of post-production that goes into interiors. Like if you ever look at a picture of a living room in a magazine, you'll probably notice there's no ceiling lights. Lamps are off. There's all kinds of tricks that, in the interior design world of photography. It's definitely not over, like, it's not an iPhone picture. There's a lot more work that goes into it after the fact.
No, for
Most of these people that are also very good photographers, I find that, the way that chefs are very creative and like good food photography, interior designers love photography too, because that's how they sell their image, and what the rooms that they're creating, and how they get hired is all visual. It's a very tight, you work very tightly together with the interior designers. They are constantly moving things. When I work with them, they see the image right away. They'll move a pillow an inch, and that is the shot. So it's always what nobody else would notice. They notice, and it is. I love working with a team like that because you find that your photography just gets better because you have someone that's very talented, in doing other things, helping you with other things. Like they can, if you're working with the interior designer on the set, you can guarantee that they're going to be making sure everything's perfect. You don't have to worry about it too much.
you
You
definitely
just have to worry about the lighting, yeah, and the
don't.
composition. I mean, one funny example is I worked with a very, very well-known and talented interior designer who does a lot of hotels and is published all the time. His name is Mark Zeff. And I worked with him a few times. And I always liked when he was on the set because he right away would know what he wanted. So you have to kind of sometimes when you're a photographer realize that sometimes you might just be a technician on this shoot. You're not really the eye. You're just the technician behind someone else's vision. You can't always, you know. But what Mark would be like for his what they call hero shots, he was very particular about what he wanted. And I hear him in my head being like, shoot lower. He would always say that. And he's from Australia, so he has a shoot lower accent. And so you'd have to get down and see it the way. And he was right. I learned something, by working with him just in that capacity. But then he would say, okay, now I just want you to go run around and take pictures with your like the way that you do. Do your thing. So he loved when I would just run around and take pictures, which is kind of called lifestyle and capture light and see things the way that I and he loved that. So it was kind of this balance between my vision and his vision too, making sure I got the shot of where he wanted that shot from and the angle. And you have to be willing to work with some big personalities, and
You
that
do.
capacity. So you have to, that's another one of the things they don't tell you about. You have to watch your temper, and you have to, and that can be challenging sometimes working with some people that are very, very opinionated and maybe don't have the graciousness that they should have. But you
Probably.
gotta don't try not to take it personally. But so it's not all fun and games all the time.
Definitely not. It definitely isn't.
So
We always end off with this question. You can give a piece of advice to anybody that's watching, that's interested in becoming a photographer. What advice would you give them?
I would say don't burn any bridges. Like always, or actually, maybe I take that back. How about that is one aspect of what I was going to say, but I would say there's always an opportunity in everything that you're doing. Like if you are getting a chance to be hired to take a picture of a place, that's an opportunity for you to develop a relationship with that client that could last for years. Like that's been something that's happened to me many times. I have continuously worked for the same clients based on that first assignment, doing a really good job and working with their budget and giving them a little more and going 110% because people will end up hiring you again and developing a relationship with you. It's really nice to have consistency with clients, having the same clients for over 10 years and growing together and shooting, like knowing, that I'm going to have a few jobs with a restaurant that I shoot all the time in a few weeks. So, yeah, I like that aspect. I think anybody that's starting out should always look as at the potential that every job has.
Hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. Okay, everybody. So that wraps up this episode of the Cubicle Podcast with Doug Young. Hope you guys enjoyed and you learned all about his photography background. And stay tuned for next week for our next guest, where all is said. Thank you. Bye.